Thomas McAllister had always been drawn to the wild landscapes of the American Southwest. The wide open deserts and rugged canyons held a strange beauty that he could not resist. As a young man, he often spent days exploring the rocky hills, following the winding paths of streams, and watching the sunlight play on the cliffs in the early morning. He loved the quiet moments when the only sounds were the wind moving through the trees and the distant calls of birds. On this particular morning, the air was cool, and the sky was painted with soft shades of pink and gold. Thomas felt a thrill in his chest, the kind of excitement that only comes when one is truly alone in nature, yet also on the edge of discovery. He carried a small bag with a few essentials, a water flask, some bread, a knife, and a small journal where he recorded his thoughts and sketches of the landscapes he loved. His plan that day was simple: follow a narrow path along the canyon walls until he reached a hidden spring he had heard about from a fellow traveler. It was said to be the clearest water in the area, a small pool tucked between two cliffs, almost secret from the eyes of the world. Thomas thought it would be the perfect place to rest, sketch, and enjoy the stillness. As he walked, the wind brushed past him, carrying the smell of sagebrush and the distant scent of wildflowers. The trail became narrower and rockier, forcing him to step carefully. Thomas paused often, peering into the shadows of the canyon to watch for lizards or the occasional rabbit. Every step brought a mixture of caution and excitement. He knew these lands were home to the Apache people, and while there had been peace in recent times, he also respected that he was an outsider in a place rich with their traditions and history. After a long walk, Thomas finally reached the spring. The water shimmered in the sunlight, almost like liquid glass, and he could see small fish darting back and forth beneath the surface. It was more beautiful than he had imagined. He set down his bag, knelt by the water, and splashed his face with the cool liquid. The refreshing water made him feel alive, and for a moment he simply sat and breathed, letting the sounds of the canyon fill his senses. Thomas had been lost in his own thoughts, sketching the cliffs and the pool in his journal, when he heard a rustling from a nearby bush. He froze, unsure of what he might find. At first, he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or a fox, moving quietly along the edge of the canyon. But then out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure emerge. She was young, moving gracefully, almost like she was part of the landscape itself. Her long, dark hair caught the sunlight, and she moved with the confidence of someone who belonged to the land in a way Thomas could never imagine. He realized quickly that she was bathing in the spring. Thomas's heart raced. He had not expected anyone else to be there, and certainly not anyone so close. He wanted to turn and leave quietly, but his curiosity and surprise rooted him in place. For her part, the young woman froze as well, her eyes wide with shock. Thomas could see the fear and the tension in her posture, and he understood immediately that he had walked into a situation of great importance, far beyond a simple accident. The young woman, whom Thomas later learned was named Ayanna, understood the rules and traditions of her people. In Apache culture, privacy and honor were highly valued, especially for women. To be seen in such a vulnerable moment by a stranger could bring shame, not just to her but to her family and community. Thomas felt a wave of guilt and panic. He did not intend to cause trouble or disrespect, yet he now realized that his presence had already put both of them in a difficult position. Ayanna's voice was calm but firm as she spoke to him. It was not anger but a mixture of surprise and authority. Thomas listened carefully, nodding, trying to communicate that he meant no harm. Words felt inadequate, yet he wanted her to understand that he was not there to cause trouble. Every movement mattered. Every glance, every gesture carried weight in this delicate moment. At that instant, Thomas noticed the approach of other figures. They were elders and members of Ayanna's community, drawn by the sound of the water and the sudden commotion. Their expressions were serious, and Thomas realized that this situation could quickly escalate, if not handled with care. He took a deep breath and stepped back, keeping his hands visible, showing he posed no threat. Ayanna moved slightly closer to him, as if to shield him from the judgmental eyes of her people, though the tension in her stance was clear. The elder's arrival brought a hush over the area. Thomas could see the concern and questioning in their eyes. They were not angry at first glance, but their presence alone communicated the seriousness of the situation. Thomas tried to explain himself, his words halting and careful, speaking as clearly as he could, using gestures and simple sentences to show he had stumbled into the situation by accident. Ayana's gaze softened slightly as she noticed his sincerity, though the weight of the tradition remained heavy in the air. In the moments that followed, Thomas and Ayana stood in quiet understanding. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Thomas thought about the long journey that had brought him here, the love for exploration and the fascination with the land, and now how quickly a simple curiosity could place him in such a complex scenario. For Ayana, the encounter was a mixture of shock, fear, and responsibility. She carried the expectations of her family and her people, but she also sensed something in Thomas that told her he was not a danger. Thomas looked around the canyon, feeling the tension in the air, but also a strange sense of connection. He had come to admire the land, the history, and the people who called it home. Now standing in front of Ayana, he realized that the human connection, the fragile, delicate interactions between people, was just as profound as the beauty of the cliffs and the water. Ayana's presence was calm but commanding. She had grown up learning the ways of her people, understanding the importance of honor, respect, and tradition. Thomas watched how she moved, how she carried herself with dignity even in a moment that could have caused panic or shame. It was clear to him that this was a person of strength and depth, someone who understood the balance between courage and care. The morning continued slowly. Thomas and Ayana remained aware of the elders around them, carefully navigating each gesture and word. Thomas sketched quietly in his journal, not wanting to intrude further, capturing the landscape and perhaps the impression of a moment that could never be repeated. Ayana, though cautious, began to relax slightly, realizing that the situation might be resolved without harm if they acted with respect and honesty. By midday, the tension in the canyon had shifted. Conversations were held in hushed tones. Gestures of understanding were exchanged, and Thomas felt a mixture of relief and awe. He realized that he had entered a world rich with customs, wisdom, and rules that were deeply respected. The accident at the spring had become more than a mistake. It was a window into a culture that valued honor and careful consideration. Above all, Thomas knew that what had started as a simple adventure had become an experience that would shape him forever. He had witnessed firsthand the importance of trust, respect, and the delicate balance of human interaction. And though he did not yet know what the next moments would bring, he understood that this encounter with Ayana was a turning point, one that could lead to consequences he had never imagined but could also teach him lessons he would carry for a lifetime. As the sun climbed higher, the light reflected off the water, casting shimmering patterns on the canyon walls. Thomas felt the warmth on his back, the quiet rustling of the trees and the soft murmur of water. Every detail seemed more vivid than ever, as if the canyon itself was alive with the story unfolding within it. He realized that nature and human life were intertwined, each influencing the other in ways that could not always be predicted or controlled. In that moment, Thomas made a silent promise to himself to approach this new, unexpected chapter with care, respect, and openness. He would listen, observe, and act with integrity, hoping that his intentions were clear and that he could navigate the traditions and expectations that surrounded him. Ayana's eyes, calm but watchful, reminded him that he was not alone in this journey. Though the circumstances were unexpected, they were also an opportunity to learn, to connect, and perhaps to understand a life very different from his own. And so, the day moved forward slowly, each step measured, each glance meaningful. Thomas felt a mixture of anticipation and caution, aware that the path ahead would require both courage and humility. The canyon, the spring, and the people who lived there had become part of his story, a story that had begun with a simple exploration, but now held the weight of history, culture, and human connection. The air in the canyon had grown warmer as the day moved on. Thomas McAllister could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. The quiet of the canyon, which had seemed so peaceful earlier, now felt charged with meaning. Ayana stood near the spring, her expression a mixture of determination and concern. Her eyes met Thomas's, and in that gaze he understood that what had begun as a simple accident was now something much more serious. Ayana's people had arrived at the edge of the spring. The elders, who carried the wisdom of generations, looked upon Thomas carefully. Their faces were calm but firm, revealing both curiosity and caution. They spoke in their own language, their words flowing like music over the rocks, and Ayana translated gently, her voice steady but urgent. "You have seen me in a private moment," she said. And by our tradition, this is not something that can be ignored. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding the seriousness of the situation. He did not want to offend or disrespect anyone, yet he felt an inner conflict. He had not meant to intrude, yet now he was part of a custom he could barely comprehend. He glanced at Ayanna and saw the strength in her posture. She was young, yet she carried the authority of her people with grace. She had spoken the words that would guide the next steps, and Thomas realized that she was taking responsibility not only for herself, but also for him. The elders began to discuss quietly among themselves. Thomas could see the respect they had for Ayanna and the careful consideration they were giving to the situation. They were wise and patient, their eyes reflecting experience and thoughtfulness. For a moment, Thomas wondered what life must have been like for them, living close to the land, knowing its secrets and rules, and understanding the importance of honor in ways he could only begin to imagine. Ayanna's voice broke the quiet. "We must act in a way that protects both of us," she said. Thomas listened carefully, realizing that she was speaking not just about him, but about the delicate balance of trust and respect between their worlds. Her words carried a firmness that left no doubt about her understanding of responsibility. Thomas felt a deep admiration for her, a recognition that her courage and wisdom were extraordinary. He tried to respond, speaking in clear, simple words, explaining that he had not intended any harm and that he wished only to show respect and understanding. The elders listened patiently, observing his gestures, his tone, and the sincerity in his eyes. Thomas noticed that the tension in the air slowly began to shift. There was still caution, but also the first glimmers of acceptance. Ayanna took a step closer to Thomas. Her eyes softened slightly and she spoke again, translating for the elders. "He has come with respect and honesty. Let us find a solution that honors both our people and this moment." The elders nodded, their expressions showing approval at her thoughtfulness and leadership. Thomas realized that she was not only courageous but wise, able to navigate the difficult balance between tradition and fairness. The conversation continued, with Thomas and Ayanna listening and responding as best they could. Each word mattered, each gesture carried weight, and Thomas felt the enormity of the situation. He understood that this was not just a matter of a single moment by the spring, but a reflection of deep cultural values and expectations. To act carelessly could lead to misunderstanding, yet to act with respect and attention could turn the situation into a bridge of understanding between two very different worlds. As the afternoon sun moved across the sky, Thomas and Ayanna shared quiet moments of communication. They could not speak freely about their feelings, but their eyes, gestures, and careful words conveyed volumes. Thomas saw in her a calm strength, a clarity of mind, and a courage that inspired him. He felt a connection growing between them, one built not on romance alone, but on trust, respect, and the shared experience of navigating something complex together. The elders eventually proposed a path forward. They spoke of customs that would preserve Ayanna's honor and ensure that Thomas showed respect to their traditions. Thomas listened intently, learning about the importance of family, community, and the roles that each person played in maintaining balance. Every word added to his understanding and respect for a culture so different from his own, yet filled with wisdom that felt universal. Ayanna guided Thomas through the customs that would follow. There were rituals of respect, moments of reflection, and careful instructions on how to show humility and honor. Thomas followed her lead, grateful for her guidance and aware that every step mattered. The spring, which had been a place of tension and uncertainty, became a site of learning and connection. Thomas realized that the moment had transformed from an accident into an opportunity to understand and grow. Throughout the day, Thomas observed Ayanna interacting with her people. He saw the mutual respect and trust she had earned, the way her voice was heard and valued, and the subtle ways she guided decisions with care and insight. Thomas marveled at her wisdom and the way she balanced courage with responsibility. He understood that the situation was as much about human character as it was about tradition. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon, Thomas and Ayanna prepared for the next step. The elders, satisfied with the careful approach, gave their guidance on how the evening would unfold. Thomas felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, but also a sense of peace. He had survived the initial shock, respected the traditions, and learned lessons he would carry for life. In the quiet moments before nightfall, Thomas and Ayanna shared a wordless understanding. They could not rush the customs, yet they could approach each moment with sincerity and patience. Thomas felt gratitude for her calm presence, for the clarity with which she navigated this challenging situation, and for the trust she had placed in him. It was a rare experience to feel so fully understood without speaking freely, and it left a lasting impression on him. Night fell softly over the canyon. The stars appeared one by one, glittering above the cliffs. Thomas felt a sense of awe at the beauty of the land and the depth of the culture he had entered. The spring reflected the starlight, shimmering like a mirror, and the quiet murmur of the water reminded him of the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the paths he had walked, the choices he had made, and the lessons he had learned in a single day. Ayanna stood beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. They shared a look that conveyed understanding, courage, and respect. In that moment, Thomas realized that this encounter would remain with him forever. It was not just a story of a single event, but a story of trust, honor, and the careful balance between curiosity and respect. The elders approached once more, offering their final words for the evening. They spoke of respect, honor, and the importance of navigating life's challenges with patience and care. Thomas listened intently, grateful for their guidance and the wisdom they shared. He understood that this was more than a lesson about one day. It was a lesson about life itself, about human connection, and about the ways in which culture and tradition guide and protect people. As the evening deepened, Thomas prepared to follow the customs suggested by the elders. He moved carefully, aware that each gesture, each word mattered. Ayanna guided him gently, offering reassurance and instruction. Together they navigated the delicate balance of tradition, respect, and understanding. Thomas felt a deep sense of admiration and gratitude for her leadership, her courage, and her wisdom. The night passed with quiet reflection and careful observance of the customs. Thomas realized that the situation, though challenging, had brought him closer to understanding a culture far different from his own. He had learned lessons of patience, humility, and respect, lessons that he would carry with him forever. And throughout it all, Ayanna remained a steady guide, a reminder that courage and wisdom could coexist, even in the most delicate of circumstances. By morning, the tension of the previous day had transformed into a quiet sense of resolution. Thomas felt a mixture of relief, respect, and gratitude. The situation had been delicate, and yet through patience, honesty, and careful attention, they had navigated it together. Ayanna's calm guidance and clear understanding had been essential, and Thomas knew that he had been fortunate to witness her courage and wisdom firsthand. As the first light of dawn touched the canyon, Thomas looked at the spring, the cliffs, and Ayanna. He realized that this encounter had changed him. What had begun as a simple exploration had turned into an experience of profound learning, respect, and human connection. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the trust placed in him, for the lessons shared, and for the opportunity to navigate such an extraordinary moment with care and integrity. And so, as the canyon awoke to a new day, Thomas and Ayanna stood together, aware that their journey had only begun. They had faced an unexpected challenge, honored the traditions of a people rich in wisdom, and discovered the power of respect, trust, and courage. It was a story that would remain with Thomas forever, a reminder of the delicate balance between curiosity and care, and of the extraordinary strength of a young woman who had guided him through it all.